take a deep breath, and let's hear a story about Blue, the white cat who senses loneliness and stays until hearts are healed. In the quiet corners of a bustling city, where the morning light filtered through tall buildings and cast golden patterns on the sidewalks, lived a remarkable white cat named Blue. His fur was as pure as freshly fallen snow, gleaming like polished pearls in the sunlight, yet his eyes were the most striking feature, deep sapphire blue, sparkling with intelligence and compassion. Despite having no permanent home, Blue moved through the city with graceful purpose, his paws padding softly against the concrete as he navigated the urban landscape with confidence and ease. Blue wasn't an ordinary stray. He possessed an extraordinary gift that set him apart from other cats. He could sense the invisible weight of loneliness that sometimes settled on human hearts, feeling it as clearly as one might feel a change in the weather. This unique sensitivity manifested as a gentle tingling in his whiskers and a soft humming in his chest, guiding him like an internal compass toward those who needed company the most. The sensation would grow stronger as he approached someone whose spirit was dimmed by solitude, calling to him like a silent melody only he could hear. The city was Blue's kingdom, and he knew every alley, park, and neighborhood intimately. He found shelter beneath awnings when it rained, warmed himself in patches of sunlight that pooled in quiet courtyards, and occasionally accepted gentle offerings of food from kind-hearted shopkeepers who had grown fond of his presence. His meals were simple but satisfying, sometimes a morsel shared by an elderly man on a park bench, other times the remnants of a child's sandwich, given with giggling delight. Blue never went hungry, for the city provided, and he gave back in his own special way. Blue's routine, if it could be called that, followed the rhythm of the city itself. He would wake with the first light of dawn, stretching his lithe body as the world slowly came alive around him. The morning air carried the scent of freshly baked bread from nearby bakeries, the earthy aroma of coffee brewing in countless homes, and the clean fragrance of dew evaporating from leaves and grass. These familiar scents grounded Blue, connecting him to the place he called home as he began his daily journey. His white fur made him easy to spot against the gray urban backdrop, yet Blue moved with a natural stealth that allowed him to observe without being intrusive. He would perch on windowsills, watching the comings and goings of humans with curious interest. He noticed how they interacted, how some walked with shoulders hunched under invisible burdens, while others moved with light steps and bright smiles. Blue learned to read these subtle human signals, understanding the complex emotional language that humans themselves sometimes failed to recognize. Children were always the first to notice Blue, their innocent eyes quickly spotting his pristine form against urban backgrounds. They would point and exclaim with delight, sometimes approaching with cautious curiosity to stroke his soft fur. Blue welcomed these gentle touches, purring softly as small fingers carefully patted his head or scratched behind his ears. These brief encounters were moments of pure joy, the children's laughter ringing like tiny bells in the otherwise monotonous city soundscape. Blue had encountered many other animals during his time on the streets, cautious squirrels who darted away at his approach, pigeons who waddled indifferently past him, and other cats who sometimes greeted him with suspicious glances or friendly meows. But Blue preferred the company of humans, finding their complex emotions and varied needs more intriguing than the simpler concerns of his fellow animals. He observed how humans could be surrounded by others yet still carry loneliness in their hearts, a paradox that fascinated his feline mind. The elderly were often the ones who needed Blue most, their lives sometimes quieted by the absence of those who had once filled their days with conversation and companionship. Mrs. Abernathy was one such person, a widow who lived in a small ground-floor apartment with a window that opened onto a quiet side street. She would sit in her armchair by this window each afternoon, watching the world pass by with wistful eyes that had seen decades of changes in the neighborhood she had always called home. Blue first noticed Mrs. Abernathy on a crisp autumn day when the leaves were turning to vibrant shades of amber and crimson. His whiskers had tingled strongly as he passed her building, drawing his attention to the window where she sat alone with a cup of tea growing cold beside her. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her cardigan buttoned against the advancing chill of the season, but her eyes held a distance that Blue immediately recognized as the look of someone lost in memories of happier times. Following his instincts, Blue approached the window and sat patiently on the sill, his tail wrapped neatly around his paws, as he gazed at Mrs. Abernathy with his deep blue eyes. At first, she didn't notice him, her gaze fixed on some invisible point in the middle distance. But when she finally turned and saw him, her face transformed with surprise and then delight, the years seeming to fall away as she leaned forward with renewed interest in the present moment. Their eyes met hers faded green, his brilliant blue, and a connection formed instantly. "Well, hello there," Mrs. Abernathy had said, her voice slightly raspy from disuse but warm with genuine pleasure. She carefully opened her window, moving slowly as if afraid Blue might dart away. But he remained perfectly still, only his tail tip twitching slightly as he assessed whether this human needed his special brand of companionship. The scent of lavender and chamomile drifted from her apartment, mingling with the faint aroma of recently baked cookies and the subtle perfume she had worn daily for decades. After a moment's consideration, Blue gracefully stepped from the windowsill into Mrs. Abernathy's apartment, his paws making no sound as they touched the worn carpet. He explored the small space with respectful curiosity, noting the photographs that covered nearly every surface images of a life well lived, filled with people who were no longer present. Mrs. Abernathy watched him with growing affection, speaking softly about the images as if Blue could understand every word, telling him stories of her late husband James and their many adventures together. Mrs. Abernathy was just the first of many humans whose lives Blue would touch with his gentle presence. There was also Marcus, a college student overwhelmed by the pressures of exams and the unfamiliarity of a new city. His tiny studio apartment became Blue's temporary home for 3 stress-filled weeks, the cat's soothing purrs providing a calming soundtrack for late-night study sessions. And Sarah, a young professional whose relationship had recently ended, leaving her adrift in an apartment that suddenly felt too large and too quiet until Blue appeared at her balcony door one rainy evening. Blue's visits were never random, always guided by his unique ability to sense emotional need. The pattern was consistent yet beautifully simple. He would appear when someone's heart was heavy with loneliness, stay until their spirit lifted, then quietly depart to find the next person who needed his special gift. His presence asked for nothing in return, offering unconditional companionship that somehow felt more meaningful because it was freely given without expectation or demand. On a particularly gray Tuesday morning, when the city seemed wrapped in a blanket of fog that muffled sounds and softened edges, Blue felt an unusually strong pull toward the city park. The misty air carried the scent of damp earth and wet foliage, refreshing and clean against the urban backdrop. As Blue made his way through the quiet streets, his whiskers tingled with increasing intensity, signaling that someone nearby was experiencing a profound sense of isolation. The park was nearly empty due to the weather, the usual joggers and dog walkers deterred by the persistent drizzle that fell from the cloud-covered sky. Blue moved silently across the wet grass, his white paws gradually becoming damp and slightly muddy, though he paid no mind to this minor discomfort. His internal compass led him to a secluded bench partially sheltered by the spreading branches of an old oak tree, where a young man sat alone, seemingly oblivious to the dampness seeping into his clothes. The man was perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly in the humidity, and a face that might have been handsome, if not for the profound sadness that seemed to weigh down his features. He stared at the ground, occasionally looking up at the misty park landscape with eyes that didn't seem to actually see what was before them. A sketchbook lay open on his lap, the pages remaining blank despite the pencil held loosely in his fingers, as if inspiration had abandoned him alongside whatever else he had lost. Blue approached cautiously, his movements deliberately slow and non-threatening as he made his way toward the bench. The man didn't notice him at first, so deep was his absorption in whatever thoughts occupied his mind. It wasn't until Blue gave a soft, inquiring meow that the man's attention was drawn downward, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of a pristine white cat with startling blue eyes looking up at him expectantly in the middle of a deserted, foggy park. "Where did you come from?" the man asked, his voice rough from disuse, but gentle with surprise. Lou responded by jumping lightly onto the bench beside him, careful to maintain a respectful distance while still offering his companionship. The man stared at Blue for a long moment, seeming to appreciate the cat's unusual coloring and remarkable eyes. Then, almost despite himself, he reached out a hesitant hand to stroke Blue's soft fur, his touch tentative at first, but growing more confident as Blue leaned into the contact with an encouraging purr. The man's name was Thomas. Blue learned as the morning progressed. Though he called himself Tom, he was an illustrator who had recently moved to the city for a promising job opportunity, only to have the position eliminated just weeks after his arrival. "Just my luck," Tom told Blue, speaking freely in the way people often do to animals, unburdened by the self-consciousness that might have tempered his words to another human. New city, no job, no friends, and now I'm sitting in the rain talking to a cat. But there was a hint of humor in Tom's voice as he said this last part, the first crack in the wall of isolation that had surrounded him. Blue settled more comfortably on the bench, his purring intensifying as he sensed this small but significant shift in Tom's emotional state. The sound seemed to fill the damp air around them, creating a pocket of comfort in the otherwise bleak day. Tom's hand continued to stroke Blue's fur rhythmically, the repetitive motion seeming to soothe him as much as it pleased the cat. As they sat together, the fog began to lift slightly, revealing glimpses of the park's true colors, the deep green of the rain-washed grass, the varied hues of flowers that dotted the landscape, the rich brown of wet tree trunks. Tom's gaze, which had been so inward-focused, gradually shifted outward to take in these details, his artist's eye awakening to the beauty that had been invisible to him just moments before. Blue watched this transformation with satisfaction, sensing the subtle changes in Tom's energy as his awareness expanded beyond his problems. Almost unconsciously, Tom began to sketch, his pencil moving across the page with increasing confidence as he captured the misty park scene. Blue remained perfectly still, providing a white focal point in the composition that seemed to emerge without conscious planning. "You're quite the model," Tom murmured appreciatively, his focus now entirely on his work rather than his troubles. The creative flow had caught him up, carrying him away from his isolation into a state of engaged presence that Blue recognized as healing. They remained on the bench for hours, Tom sketching page after page, as the day gradually brightened around them. The rain stopped, sunlight occasionally breaking through the cloud cover to create dramatic effects of light and shadow across the park. Other people began to appear, an elderly couple walking hand in hand, a woman jogging with her golden retriever, a family with young children who pointed excitedly at Blue's distinctive form. Tom noticed these people now, even offering a smile and a nod to those who passed close by. When Tom's stomach growled audibly, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since the previous evening, he laughed softly and closed his sketchbook. "I suppose we both could use some lunch," he said to Blue, who stretched languidly in response. Tom gathered his belongings and stood, looking down at his feline companion with obvious affection. "Are you coming?" he asked, and Blue followed without hesitation as Tom made his way out of the park toward a small cafe on the corner that advertised outdoor seating where Cat might be welcome. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and freshly prepared food. The server, a friendly young woman named Elena, was immediately charmed by Blue, commenting on his unusual coloring and striking eyes. "I've never seen a stray cat so clean and well kept," she remarked, bringing a saucer of cream for Blue while Tom ordered his lunch. "He's special," Tom agreed, watching as Blue lapped delicately at the offered treat, his white paws tucked neatly beneath him. Elena continued to check on them throughout Tom's meal, each time lingering a bit longer to chat. Tom found himself enjoying these brief social interactions, his natural friendliness, long suppressed by disappointment and loneliness, gradually re-emerging in the comfortable atmosphere. Blue observed these exchanges with apparent satisfaction, his blue eyes moving between the two humans as they spoke, his presence somehow making the conversation easier than it might otherwise have been. By the time Tom had finished his meal, he had not only enjoyed a substantial conversation with Elena, but had also spoken briefly with an older man at a neighboring table who had admired his sketches. The man, it turned out, owned a small gallery in the arts district and expressed interest in seeing more of Tom's work. Tom left the cafe with the man's business card in his pocket, a tentative appointment to show his portfolio, and a lightness in his step that had been absent for weeks. Blue continued to accompany Tom throughout the afternoon, following him back to his modest apartment in a converted industrial building. The space was sparsely furnished, but filled with art supplies, easels, canvases, paints, and sketching materials occupied much of the available surface area. Large windows let in abundant natural light, making the studio apartment brighter and more inviting than one might expect from its external appearance. Tom seemed to see his living space with fresh eyes as he entered with Blue, noticing possibilities rather than limitations. "You can stay as long as you like," Tom told Blue, setting down a bowl of water and some tuna he found in his cupboard. Lou accepted these offerings gracefully, but both he and Tom seemed to understand that this arrangement was temporary. There was an unspoken agreement between them, a recognition that Blue's purpose was to help Tom rediscover his connection to the world around him, not to become a permanent fixture in his life. This understanding gave their time together a bittersweet quality that made each moment more precious. Over the following weeks, Blue's presence became a catalyst for positive change in Tom's life. With the cat's quiet companionship, Tom found renewed inspiration for his art, creating a series of illustrations featuring a white cat moving through urban landscapes. The works captured both solitude and connection, resonating with viewers in a way Tom's previous pieces hadn't. When he showed the series to the gallery owner he'd met at the cafe, he was offered a small exhibition, his first in the new city. The opening night of Tom's exhibition was a modest success, drawing an encouraging crowd of local art enthusiasts. Blue was present for this milestone, having returned to Tom's apartment that morning after an absence of several days. He sat regally on a window ledge in the gallery, watching the proceedings with apparent approval as visitors admired the artwork and engaged Tom in conversation about his inspiration and techniques. Elena from the cafe was there, her friendly presence now a regular part of Tom's life. I don't know where he came from, but he showed up exactly when I needed companionship, Tom explained to a curious attendee who had asked about the white cat that featured so prominently in his work. He's got this incredible sense of timing, disappears for days, but always seems to know when to come back. The woman nodded understanding, sharing that she had experienced something similar with a stray cat during a difficult period in her own life. This connection creating an instant bond between her and Tom. Blue observed these interactions with satisfaction, his whiskers occasionally twitching as he sensed the positive emotions flowing through the gallery space. The loneliness that had once surrounded Tom like a heavy cloud had dissipated, replaced by a network of new connections, some casual, others deepening into genuine friendship. The transformation wasn't just external. Tom himself moved with confidence now, his posture open and his expressions animated as he discussed his work and listened to others with genuine interest. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Tom found Blue still watching from his window perch. "You know, don't you?" he said softly, approaching to stroke the cat's pristine fur. "You know I'm going to be okay now." Blue purred in response, leaning into Tom's touch with affectionate pressure. The gallery was quiet around them, Tom's artwork creating a colorful backdrop to this moment of acknowledgement and gratitude between human and cat. That night, Tom left the window in his apartment slightly open, an unspoken understanding between them that Blue would leave when he was ready. They shared one last evening together, Tom sketching while Blue curled contentedly nearby, the silence between them comfortable and full of unspoken communication. The city lights created patterns on the wooden floor, and the distant sounds of urban life provided a gentle soundtrack to their companionship, a reminder of the world beyond, that no longer seemed so alienating to Tom. In the morning, Tom wasn't surprised to find that Blue had gone, the slightly open window telling the story of his silent departure. There was no sadness in this discovery, only a peaceful acceptance and profound gratitude. Blue had come when needed and stayed until his work was done, just as he always did. Tom touched the empty space on the couch where Blue had spent his last night, whispering a thank you to his remarkable friend before turning to prepare for a day that would include coffee with Elena and a meeting about a potential illustration commission. Meanwhile, Blue was already moving through the awakening city, his white fur catching the early morning sunlight as he navigated familiar streets with purposeful steps. His whiskers tingled with that familiar sensation, guiding him toward someone new who needed his unique form of companionship. The city was full of lonely hearts, but Blue moved with the certainty of one who knows exactly where he is needed, his extraordinary gift allowing him to bring comfort and connection to those who had forgotten how to find it themselves. In a small apartment several blocks away, an elderly man named George was facing his first day of retirement with unexpected apprehension rather than joy. After 43 years of routine and workplace camaraderie, the emptiness of unstructured days stretched before him like an intimidating void. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee growing cold before him, as he wondered how to fill the hours that had always been claimed by work, his sense of purpose suddenly uncertain in this new chapter of life. When a soft sound drew George's attention to his small balcony, he was surprised to see a pristine white cat with remarkable blue eyes gazing at him through the glass door. The cat's appearance was so unexpected, so out of place in his 11th floor apartment, that George momentarily forgot his worries as he stood to investigate this curious visitor. "Where did you come from?" he asked, as he carefully opened the door, echoing the very question Tom had asked weeks earlier on a foggy morning in the park. Blue entered George's apartment with the quiet confidence that characterized all his interactions, his blue eyes taking in the space and its occupant with gentle assessment. George found himself smiling for the first time that day as he watched the cat explore, something about the animal's presence already lightening the heavy atmosphere of uncertainty that had filled the apartment. "Well, I wasn't expecting company today," George said, his voice warming with unexpected pleasure. but I suppose I could use some." As Blue settled comfortably on a sunny patch of carpet, George felt a subtle shift in his perspective. Perhaps retirement wasn't an ending, but a beginning, a time for new discoveries and unexpected connections. He looked at the cat with growing curiosity and gratitude, unaware that he was just the latest in a long line of lonely hearts whose lives had been touched by the remarkable white cat with blue eyes, the silent guardian who moved through the city, bringing comfort and companionship wherever it was most needed. And somewhere across the city, Tom was explaining his latest illustration concept to Elena over coffee, his eyes bright with creative energy and connection. The white cat featured prominently in the sketch before him, moving through an urban landscape filled with subtle connections between seemingly isolated individuals. "I think I'll call the series The Guardian," Tom said, his voice soft with understanding of something larger than himself, for all the unseen ways we look after each other, sometimes without even knowing it.